Would you like some good news this morning? Okay, good. We are inundated with bad news, aren't we? It seems like every time you turn on the TV, there's more and more bad news. But I want to give you some good news. A Syracuse University has concluded that Christians are more generous than non-Christians. Interesting. And what they found is that in every way, Christians are more generous than non-Christians. Those who follow Jesus are more generous with their time. They're more generous in giving their money. They're more generous giving blood. Giving in every way, the family of God is just more generous than those who are part of the family of the devil. And the researchers, they tracked four major factors that they said contribute to this. This isn't my research. This is Syracuse University. They said there were four factors. Number one, church attendance. Secondly, the presence of two-parent families. Also, a Protestant work ethic. And I thought this fourth one was kind of funny. A distaste for government services. And they found those four, what they recognize is that for those who are giving on a regular basis and actually giving generously, those four things all contribute to those who are just donating more time, more money, more blood, more everything. I think the one interesting factor, in fact, they even broke it down even more so, was that factor of church attendance. Here's what they found. 91% of regular church attenders give more to charity every year, compared to 66% who do not attend any local church. That's amazing, isn't it? You know, in fact, what they find is that those who are regular with their church attendance, they give 4 times more money than those who don't attend a church. That's fascinating. And all God's church treasurers said, amen. We have 2 of them I know of, right? In the church, yeah. Yeah. But you know, it's interesting as you look more into this, what they find is that they give more money, that the family of God gives more money, not just in church, but also donate more money outside of church, like to a non-profit, or I should say non-religious charities like the Red Cross and other charities of that nature. I think that's actually some great news, isn't it? It's good to know that God's family is stepping up, that we are giving, we're trying to be generous, and that encourages me. I want to give as much as I can. But you know what really motivates me to give? What really motivates me to give is when I realize that God is a generous God. Has God been generous to you? He has. 4 people said yes, amen. I'll ask the rest. Has God been generous to you? Oh, I tell you, he is so generous. In fact, generosity is God's idea. I mean, that's His very nature. He's a generous God. In fact, it says in probably the most well-known verse of all, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that He gave. He's generous. Every good thing you have in your life is a gift from God. The air you breathe is a gift from God. The body you have is a gift from God. The car you drive is a gift from God. And people are saying, oh, God gave me a clunker. Well, okay, it's a gift. Hey, you know, the emotions you have, the dreams you dream, all the friends you enjoy, the grace that you experience each and every moment, the hope you have in your heart, all of those things, they are gifts from the generous hand of God. Every good thing you have in your life is a God thing. It shouldn't surprise us or anyone to discover that God's family is just a generous family. Generosity is a character trait of God's family. And the more we are walking with God, the more we're going to become more like Jesus. The more you grow, the more you're going to become like the God you are serving. In fact, if we can put it this way, the more you live like God, the more you become like God, the more generous you will become. That's just going to happen. I mean, you cannot become more like God and become less generous. You will always become more generous the more and more you develop a heart like God. That's just the way that God works. If you want to become more like God, lean into generosity. And what is going to happen is that it's going to impact not just your giving habits, it will impact every habit of your life. It will impact the way that you look at people. It'll give you more compassion. It will develop so many beautiful things in your life if you just lean into this beautiful characteristic called generosity. Well, we're looking at the Can You Dig It series. Believe it or not, we have this weekend, next week, we're getting to the end. I'm going to warn you now, I'm going to break out the official Can You Dig It uniform next Sunday. So I'm letting you know it's coming back next Sunday. But I love the promise that Jesus gives us in Luke chapter 6. In fact, it's just one verse. I'd like you to read it with me. Here's the words of Jesus. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. God wants to pour blessings into your life. He does that in response to how you are generous with what He has currently given to you. Here's what Jesus says, give and it will be given to you. And I just want to look at, okay, what are some things that happen as we develop and we grow more and more generous? One thing that begins to happen is that we are blessed with increased faith. It's really something that happens as we are generous with what God has already given me. He's currently blessed me with these particular things, including that clunker you might drive. When we are faithful and generous with what God has given us, He gives us more. Now, this particular verse comes from a passage that is known as the Sermon on the Plain. It's in the book of Luke, and Matthew has the Sermon on the Mount, and so some call this the Sermon on the Plain. And there are a lot of similarities between those two sermons. Jesus is talking about having a faith that impacts every area of your life. He's saying there's no area of your life that should be left untouched if you have a faith within me and if you're following after me. He said every area of your life is going to be impacted. In fact, he says, for instance, a vibrant faith is going to show up in your life so much so that you will be able to love people that are hard to love. Do you have anybody in your life like that? They're just a stretch of hard road. He also goes on to say, for those that have a vibrant faith in God, he said, that's going to show up in the way you forgive those who are difficult to forgive. And as you keep looking in that passage there in Luke chapter 6, it goes on to say about being merciful or being kind to those who may not even appreciate your mercy or your kindness and may just trample all over that. And the same applies to when it comes to the resources that God has given to you. He says, give and it will be given to you. Yes, this applies to, give love, and actually more love is going to be given back to you. As you forgive others, God will forgive you. As you show mercy, God will show mercy to you. The kindness thing goes back and forth. It's a principle called reciprocity. Jesus calls us that we should have an over-the-top faith. Impacts every area, and yes, that also includes how we are giving and how we are using what God has given to us. This is because God is a loving God. He's a merciful God. He's a forgiving God. He's kind. He is generous. These are character traits of God's family. And Jesus calls us to live with such a vibrant faith that it impacts every area of our life. There's a couple in Canada named Victor and Thelma Hayes. They won $7.5 million in the Canadian lottery. You think, well, it's not as much as it used to be. $7.5 million, okay? Would anybody say, I would love to have that winning ticket? That would be awesome, wouldn't it? Well, that's what they won. And so, of course, they get interviewed. Okay, what are you going to do with the money and everything? And they said, 89 years old. Thelma said, we're not going to be giddy high spenders. And so Victor spoke, and he said, well, I'm buying myself a new Lincoln Town Car. Like, okay. Victor's picking up what I'm putting down. All right. He said, Thelma, what are you going to get? She said, oh, I don't know. I think I'll get a new pair of nylons. That's what everybody's been doing. They've been laughing about this. Seriously, you have just tapped into this vast resource of riches. And all you're going to get is a new pair of nylons, really. You would think that maybe when she realizes, okay, $7.5 million. Do you know how many nylons you can buy with $7.5 million? In the same way, though, when we recognize the vast resources of God's great grace and of how generous He is to us, it should make us want to be incredibly generous. I want to give as much as I possibly can. When I realize just how much God has forgiven me, I want to be generous in my forgiveness of other people. When I understand just how merciful the Lord is to me, that helps me focus and helps me to have mercy on the people that I need to have mercy upon. And when I realize just how generous God is to me, I've tapped into this vast resource of generosity because I serve a generous God. I mean, I'm never going to deplete the resources of that if I just buy nylons every day of the week type of thing. But if I recognize the incredible resource of God's grace and generosity, then I can be just as generous as I can possibly be. I want to be over the top. Maybe you've seen this in your own life as if you've taken steps of generosity. I know a number of you here in our church have made that step of commitment to tithe. And I want to be generous, and I want to give the first 10% of my income to the work of God's kingdom, to the local church. And what you have discovered is that as you have cut that corner off and you've given that to God, it's just that He has been faithful to help you to manage the other 90% in such a way that He just blesses that, and so He meets the needs that you have. This is just how our generous God works. And as you see Him working and meeting your needs, what you end up finding out is my faith is increasing. Because I gave this, and boy, this was a step. I remember when my wife and I, especially were in college and seminary, and we had made that commitment to tithe before we got the call to the ministry. And we just kept doing it. We just kept tithing with whatever God gave us. We would give a tenth of that to any local church that we were a part of at the time. God just kept meeting our needs. Yes, we had to tell ourselves no, which, by the way, that's a good thing to tell yourself. Can I just ask, when is the last time you told yourself no? But when we had to tell ourselves no because we're saying a bigger yes to Jesus, He just blessed, and He took care of all the needs that we ever had as we're going through seminary, as going through Bible college, and even today, God is just taking good care of us. See, when we see God honoring our generosity, that increases our faith. Realize I could probably give more. And I want to be generous because I recognize that God is meeting all of my needs according to His riches and glory, as Paul says it. And so as I'm generous with the things that He has given me today, it increases my faith. This principle of reciprocity is even found in the Old Testament. Here's what King Solomon said: "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." Isn't that something? The Proverbs, it's like reading through fortune cookies. You know, you read through one or two verses, or maybe just a very short passage at a time there. And these are just overarching truths. This is the way that God has set up the world, and this is how the world works. And according to Solomon there in Proverbs, he says when we are generous and we are refreshing other people, guess what? God actually refreshes us. Have you seen that? Is that something that you're experiencing? Because as God has nudged you to take a step of generosity, that suddenly you're trying to refresh somebody else, trying to bless another person, that somehow and in some way that God just refreshes you. It's just a beautiful thing. Maybe you give your time to minister and partner in our children's ministry, and God just blesses you. Or perhaps it's you're giving your energy to maybe to listen to a friend, and or maybe you're giving financially in some way. God that's just how He works. He says, "Give, and it will be given to you." Generosity not only strengthens your faith, but it also strengthens the faith of other people. There was a story I ran across a while ago. There's a woman. Her name is Kate, and her husband Mike. I can't remember now just where they were living, but they'd been married for quite a while. They had 3 children, and Mike was a guy it's not that he hated Christmas. He just hated what Christmas has become. He hated the over-commercialization of Christmas. He hated all the frantic running around at Christmas and all the gifts of desperation that we just rush out, to the 5 Quarters store. That used to be Dollar Tree. Now it's 5 Quarters. And we get those last-minute gifts. Oh, hey, Steve, look, I got you a gift. Yeah. He hated all that. He loved the real meaning of Christmas. He just hated what Christmas has become. So Kate was listening to him, grouse about that. Ladies, does your husband grouse about things? Don't answer if he's sitting next to you. But she thought, I should probably do something about this, probably help in some way. So their son, Kevin, was involved with high school or junior high wrestling, and they were wrestling this inner city team. It was sponsored by an inner city church, and as they got to the meet, Kevin's team runs out, and they got these blue and gold shiny singlets on, and all new shoes, all new equipment. Everything looks amazing. This team comes out like, wow, those guys look great. The other teams come running out, and man, they're dressed in basically it's their own shorts and t-shirts. Their shoes. The wrestling shoes are so bad. The only thing holding the wrestling shoes together were the actual tennis shoes, the shoestrings. That's it. There was nothing else really you would say anything about. And that team was bad. I mean, their son's team, they took that other team to the woodshed. Every meet, they were just beating up those other kids. And as Mike saw this happen, he'd say, "Oh man, I just wish they could win one match." Because, that every time they lose, you could just see their emotions just dropping lower and lower, and their confidence getting lower. And, oh, no, we got to go send somebody else out there. They're going to get beat too. And as Kate was watching that, and she was listening to her son, she decided then and there, this is what she's going to do. So after the meet, she went to a sporting goods store, and she bought a bunch of new singlets, and she bought a bunch of new shoes. And she also bought headgear, because that other team, they didn't have headgear to wrestle in. Talk about cauliflower ear, man, that's serious business. And she gave it to that church anonymously. And on Christmas Eve, she wrote a note, and she put it in an envelope on the tree. She said, "This year, this is my gift for you for Christmas." And Mike was so excited to see that instead of getting a bunch of these desperation gifts, his wife, she did something that really touched his heart, and he was so happy that somebody else is going to be blessed with what his wife did. And that's what they would do every year. She would do various things. One year it was giving to she gave money for these mentally disabled children to go to a hockey game. Another year, she gave a check to some elderly brothers whose house just burnt down, and so she would just do various just generous things to bless other people in the community. And he just loved to see that. One very difficult year, The family, they weren't sure if they were going to put up a tree. Kevin was still in high school, but his dad, Mike, had passed away of cancer that year. She barely got the tree up, and when she did, though, Christmas Eve, she went out with the money that she would have given to Kevin. She went out and she did another gift of compassion for someone else. Put that envelope on the tree on Christmas Eve. The next morning, when she got up, she walked out and she saw 3 more envelopes on that tree. Each of their kids, they took the money that they would have spent on gifts for each other, and they went out and they were blessing others in honor of their dad. See, that's what happens when we are generous. Not only does it strengthen our faith, it also strengthens the faith of others. Giving strengthens your faith. Giving will strengthen the other people's faith and encourage them to grow in their faith and in generosity. As we develop a generous lifestyle, we're also blessed with increased resources. This is the picture of the church out in England called St. Peter's and St. Mary's Church. It's in, let me get the name of it, Stowmarket, England. They needed all kinds of repairs. Boy, glad we don't have a church like that. So there's always stuff that needed to be done, and unfortunately, they didn't have a lot of money, and so the pastor, what he decided that he would do, and I'm sure he had the board's approval and all this, he gave to every member of the church. There was 90 people in church. He gave to every person of the 90-person congregation what is equivalent to $18. And he told them, I want you to take this money that's given to you and use it in some way so it could be multiplied for God's kingdom. One person took the $18 and they bought a bunch of ingredients. They made over $750 in baked goods. That's a lot. I didn't know cookies sold for that much in England, but I guess they do. Another person, they took their money and they bought some wool and they made a bunch of scarves. They made $138 for the scarves that they sold. They started out with 18 and they made $138. Man, I thought, that's an awesome investment. So, and all the different people, they were doing things. And so what they ended up doing when they all got back together and they presented back to God what they had earned, over $9,000 was earned for the repairs for the church. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? It actually reminds me of a story that Jesus told, right? He told about a man who's going on a long journey. I think actually Reverend Mark Jenkins preached on this earlier this summer. And the man gave to each of his servants a certain amount of gold. And they were sent out, go, be fruitful, be multiply. The day is coming that you're going to have to bring back to me an answer for what you've done. Here's what Jesus said in that parable to 2 of those servants. He said, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Now, we need to be incredibly careful whenever we talk about generosity. Because some will say, oh, the Bible teaches something called a prosperity gospel. That is not what the Bible is teaching at all. Those who share this slant or interpretation of the gospel, what they are doing is they want you to focus on the reward, not on the motivation. Jesus is talking about the motivation. And they want us to focus on the reward. The Bible does not teach a prosperity gospel, nor does it teach a poverty gospel. Those who would approach the Bible with a poverty mindset, they would teach that all wealth is evil. You need to get rid of it, which is amazing when we recognize all the wealthy people that we see even throughout Scripture. No, really what the Bible actually teaches is a provision gospel, which means that God has given you a certain amount of provisions. He wants you to be faithful and generous with what He has provided for you now. And as you are faithful and generous with what He has given you, He may put you in charge of other things. I was joking with my brother the other day, and we were talking about becoming a millionaire. I said, you know what? I know God can't trust me with $1 million. Man, Besides that, my wife can't trust me with $1 million. I don't know anybody who would trust me with $1 million. And actually, that's the way that God provides for us. He gives us certain amounts of gifts or resources or opportunities according to our abilities. And He calls us to be faithful and generous with what He has given us. And if in His wisdom He chooses to give us more, He just may do that. So please do not take anything I'm saying about generosity today as, oh, the pastor said, well, if I give this much, then so much, I'm going to get another corner every time. No, that's not exactly what that point that she was making at all. So please don't think that, oh, that's all prosperity or it's poverty. No, we're talking about provision. God will provide for all of your needs. And as you are generous, He will continue to provide for all of your needs, and He may even put you in charge of other blessings as well. When we're faithful with the few things that God has given us, He may bless us with even more things. He may do that here in this life, or maybe in the next life, He will put us in charge of more things. But everything we have belongs to God. Do you realize that? Everything we have belongs to God. He may choose to give some a little more because He can trust some a little more than He can trust me. And I'm okay with that because it's all His anyhow. But what God does is He sends us out to be good, faithful, generous managers of what He has given to us. And I just want to ask you, how are you being generous with what God has given you today? Are you being generous? Here's some ways that some folks, even right here in our church, have chosen to be generous. I mentioned this already, but some have taken the step of faith to tithe, to give 1/10 of their income to the work of God's kingdom through the local church. That's a beautiful step, but that's not the only step to take, but that's a wonderful step of generosity. In fact, here, can I just say this? Because I was thinking about this the other day, and I know people who tithe, but they're not generous. Because generosity is an issue of the heart. Tithing is an issue of the checkbook. I can give 10% of my income to the work of God's kingdom and still be a very miserly individual. See, when God talks about generosity, He's talking about an attitude that I want to give as much as I possibly can. I know there's a few people who God has blessed them in tremendous ways. They actually live on a reverse tithe. They live on 10% and they give God 90% of their income. That's incredible. And that's an issue of the heart. But I can give 90% of my income to God and still be a miser and still be very selfish. So God calls us to live a life of generosity, that it comes from my heart. I want to give as much or as more as I possibly can. Some have done that through tithing. Some have also done this through serving. You're giving your time in ministry of the church. You're giving your time maybe mentoring in our community. Maybe you're sponsoring children. So many of you are a part of the Operation Christmas Child that we have going, and you want to bless children now, and maybe you'll meet them later in heaven. That's a great thing to do. But all of those ways are ways that we are developing a heart of generosity. See, God's people are generous people. That's how God's people live. The more we're becoming more like Jesus, the more generous that we're going to be. And I'm just going to say, I am amazed at the generosity that I see here even in our church. It is an honor to pastor people who are developing that beautiful heart of generosity. It is so cool. When we are generous, God increases our faith. When we are generous, He increases our resources. Also, when we're generous, He increases our potential. It's amazing what happens when we decide to just be generous, how the potential that opens up. There was a little boy. This is not him. This is actually his brother. But he was in the church nursery. A little boy was down there, and he had 2 red balls, 1 in each hand. Then he had 3 more Nerf balls that he had squished between his knees. And the problem is that his little knees, they weren't big enough to hold all 3 balls. And so he would try to grab one ball, and the other one would pop out. And so he kept trying to hold all these things that he had. And because one little Nerf ball kept popping out, some of the other kids in the nursery, they thought, hey, I'd like to play with that ball now. And so what he would do, he would snarl like a hyena over a carcass. And all these other kids, they weren't even getting close. They were circling like vultures, trying to get in and get a ball, but he would not let that happen. This went on the entire church service. That little kid was just holding on to all those things. Can I ask you this? Who was having a good time in that nursery? I don't think anybody was having a good time. It wasn't the little kid who was holding on to the balls. He couldn't even play with them because he's trying to protect them. He couldn't enjoy them because he was afraid he might lose them. And the other kids, they weren't enjoying that either. I wonder what would have happened had this little boy decided to share what he had been given. I think the nursery workers would have signed up to work next week too, because it would have been a whole lot of fun. And the other kids, instead of trying to snatch a ball here and there, they all could have actually been playing together. They could have had a great time. Maybe that little boy there who was being so selfish, maybe he could have made a friend or two. Here's the big kicker, though. When the sermon was finally over, guess what? The parents showed up, and they picked up their selfish child, and all the balls were left behind. Do you realize that all the things that you're holding on to right now, you are going to leave behind? You're not taking any of it with you. I've been to more funerals than I care to admit. They don't have trailer hitches on those hearses. All the stuff that we think is so important, and it is important stuff, but all of that stuff gets left behind at the end. It's just what we do with it now determines what God has for us in the future. We mentioned that story that Jesus told about the man who was going on a journey, and he gave 3 of his servants bags of gold. One of them had a smaller bag of gold, but it was gold, and it wasn't his. It belonged to the master. And instead of going out and taking a risk, or even being generous, trying to bless somebody else, he went out and he just buried that in the sand. The time came for the master to come back. He went and he dug it up, and he took it back to his master and said, here's what's yours. Do you know what that master said to his servant? Here's what he said. He said, you wicked and lazy servant. You knew that I was a hard man. Sowing or reaping where I have not sown. You should have at least put my money on deposit at the bank so that you could receive an increase. He said, you could have done just the minimum amount to be able to have a return on my investment in you. You see, so many of us, we need to quit hoarding the blessings God has given to us. We have such an abundance of good things, but so many of us, we're sitting like that little kid in the nursery, so afraid to let go of what we've somehow grabbed a hold of. We're so afraid that if I let something go, I'm not going to be able to get anything back in return. Now some are thinking, okay, well, talk to me about this return thing. Because if I give this much, then how much am I getting back from God? Okay, so let's say you mentioned tithing a couple of times. If I actually tithe, then what am I getting back? What's the ROI on tithing today? Can I just simply say, I don't exactly know. But I do know this, that when we reduce the blessings of God down to dollars and cents, we are looking at all the wrong things. But he blesses us in ways that are beyond what we can actually measure. Is it okay if you measure a blessing of God without using a dollar sign in front of it first? We have to quit hoarding. We have to start telling ourselves no so we can say a bigger yes to God. Generosity, it is sharing the good things that God has given you. It will open up so many doors of opportunity. But we do have to take that step to first be generous. Last month, our church, we hit an incredible milestone. Maybe you didn't know this. But last month in July, we have hit the milestone that our church, this congregation, has been ministering in Independence, Iowa now for 100 years. Isn't that amazing? That is so cool. I mean, how amazing is that? It began as a small little group of 14 people in the pastor's basement. And it was right across from the old mill. Probably wasn't that old back then. But it just what has happened is that group of 14 people, they gathered together to worship and serve God here in this community, and God has just blessed their efforts. Souls have been saved, missionaries have been called, sent, and supported. Marriages have been made strong, and it's so neat because babies that were dedicated, they grew up to know and love and serve Jesus. They had kids, and they dedicated their children to know and love and serve Jesus. Those kids have grown up, and now those kids are having kids who are being raised by their parents so they can know and love and serve Jesus. This is what's happening. I mean, none of that has happened by accident. It's been incredible what God is doing. And the fact is, God has done all the heavy lifting. He's done all the big stuff. But He's done all that heavy lifting in response to some people who've chosen to be incredibly generous with what the Lord has entrusted to them. He chooses to work through His children. People have given sacrificially. People have given cheerfully. People have given generously. And now it's your turn. It's my turn. Because it's right that we should celebrate this milestone. That milestone can become a tombstone real soon. We need to leverage this opportunity and to make some decisions now so that 100 years from now, if Jesus tarries, there will be a whole lot of other people who will be looking back and say, you know what those folks did 100 years ago? They were very strategic. They were very generous. They were very wise with what God had blessed them at that time. And the only reason that congregation is going to be here 100 years from now is because of what the current congregation does for the glory of God with the gifts and resources He's given to us. So at a recent board meeting, we were talking about this. We need to dig into this. Okay, I came up with the whole "can we dig it" idea, all right? I said, I want to use it. Okay, fine. They said, go ahead, Pastor, go ahead. So, but at a recent board meeting, we decided there's several initiatives that we would like to capitalize on and as we celebrate this achievement. First of all, yes, we're going to have a great big meal. In this fall, it's a big celebration meal. We're going to look inwardly. We're going to celebrate. We're going to eat. We're all going to have a great meal, and that's going to be amazing. But also what we want to do is throughout this year is we want to be able to share some family videos. We're going to be interviewing various church families, and throughout the year, we're just going to sprinkle in these videos of how God has blessed their lives through Hope Wesleyan and how God continues to bless them. Some of them are already being recorded. They are really, really good. And I can't wait to begin to show those to you as our church year unfolds. But also, we don't want to just have this inwardly, okay? This isn't about cupcakes and videos. We recognize that God has planted us here locally. And here's what we want to do to capitalize on this milestone. We're going to be presenting Bibles to every member of the city council. And we want to present them to them and let them know that we want to bless them with this gift, but we're also here to help them to govern according to God's Word. Because if this community is not led by the principles of the Word of God, then we're just building this community on sand. We also want to be able to have in winter, it'll be just after Christmas, but during the wintertime, we want to have what's known as a family fun fest. And what that is, we're going to rent the entire community center, and we're going to invite the whole community to come and to have a great opportunity to gather together. That's our future congregation, and we want to bless them. And we're going to start making connections with people who currently are not sitting in these chairs, but by the grace of God, they will be, and we want to reach them for God's glory. This is a fun way to be able to reach them, and we will need plenty of help for that. But something about our church that has been so vital is that we're not just ministering locally. At the same time, we're ministering globally. And God has sown into the heart of our congregation a missionary gene. And we want to bless those that we're not going to meet them in this world. We'll meet them in the next world, but we're called to minister to them right now. As you know, we are raising funds for our 4th freshwater well. And based on the numbers that I've received, the money that has been given and is budgeted in the church budget throughout the year, we have just under $2,500 raised for the 4th freshwater well. That's awesome. It's going to cost $13,000, but guess what? We got $2,500. Hey, we're getting there. Here's the generosity challenge. If we as a congregation can raise the remaining funds for the 4th freshwater well, the board has approved a matching grant. So once we reach $13,000 for the 4th well, the board has already approved funds for a 5th freshwater well. Let's do this by our next church birthday, okay? So between now and July, if we can raise the remaining funds for that 4th well, that will activate an additional $13,000 for the 5th well. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, because some of you were here for our local church conference. You're like, well, Pastor Bob, at the local church conference, you said that we're struggling financially. We don't even have enough money to meet the needs of just the regular church here. How are we going to fund all of this stuff? I'm so glad you've asked. Because, like I said, we serve a generous God. And He blesses generosity. Here's how we're going to do this. There was a dear lady who's part of our congregation. Now, I'm about to cry when I think about her. Her name was Jan Markman. And Jan, she loved the Lord. She loved our church. She loved our community. She loved missions. She had missionaries staying in her home. Jan died at the end of 2021. And she left a portion of her estate to be given to Hope Wesleyan Church to be used wisely for God's kingdom. No other strings attached. Just use it wisely for the kingdom of God. We've been using some of those funds, but we believe that through those funds that we still have, we call it the Jan Markman Memorial, we can accomplish these kingdom goals as we celebrate our 100th birthday. Jan was a person who exemplified this promise of Jesus. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured out into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Let's dig into this thing called generosity. Let's bless people now. Meet them later. If you'd like to give toward the well, you can do that in the offering envelope. You can just write well, and every penny will go to the well. You may want to use our online giving platform. There's a drop-down menu. You can just select freshwater well. Every penny that we receive for the freshwater well, all of that gets sent to World Hope International. As I kind of wrap all of this up, let me just ask you one final question. Are you becoming more greedy, or are you becoming more generous? Really think about that. Because one represents the heart of Satan, the other represents the heart of Jesus.